Alright, so in this video we're going to talk more about doing proofs, specifically proofs involving CPCTC, which stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So there's your CPCTC. Alright, so and when you see that, essentially what you're saying is if you know that the two triangles are congruent, then you know all of their corresponding parts are going to be congruent to each other also. Okay, so remember that it's basically like saying that if you have a carburetor from a 57 Chevy, just as using an analogy, if you have a part from a 57 Chevy, you say a carburetor, that's going to be the same as the carburetor from another 57 Chevy. All right, but if you have two carburetors that are from two different kinds of cars, right, then they might be the same, or they might not. We don't know. But if it's coming from the same car, then they got to be the same part. All right. So the thing is, though, before you use CPCTC, first thing you got to do is prove that the triangles are congruent to each other. Prove that you have the same kind of car. All right. Then once you know you have the same kind of car, you know they're going to have the same parts. All right. So let's look at a couple of examples right here real quick. All right. So notice that right here, the prove, we're used to seeing that say prove triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. This doesn't say that. This says prove angle C is congruent to angle F. And notice right here is C and F. We don't know that those are congruent. All right, so that's not information we were given. So in order to prove that a part of these triangles are congruent, first thing we need to do is show that the triangles themselves are congruent. All right, so what we're given is AB is congruent to DE, angle A is congruent to angle D, AC is congruent to DF. So we're given those three things. So in our proof, we put those three things as givens, right? We got right here's givens. And that's enough information that's given to us to say, okay, the triangles are congruent because of side, angle, side. Now, once we know they're congruent, we know their corresponding parts are congruent. So we can say, okay, well, now that these are congruent, we know C is the same as F, and we know E is the same as B, and we know that EF is the same as BC. So once we know the triangles are congruent, we can give all their corresponding parts congruent labels also. So now, since the triangles are congruent, we can say what we're trying to prove. Right? It always goes last. We can say angle C is congruent to angle F now because the corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent, which is, again, essentially just means if the triangles are congruent, the parts are all congruent. And we know from step 4 right here that the triangles are congruent, so now we know their corresponding parts are going to be congruent. So we know C is congruent to F. All right, over here we've got another one. We're given that the three sides are all congruent to each other, so we can say the triangles are congruent by side, side, side. Then if all the sides are congruent, and that means the triangles are congruent, all the corresponding parts are congruent. So angle M is congruent to angle P, N is congruent to Q, and O is congruent to R. We didn't know that until we found out that the triangles were congruent. So now that we know the corresponding parts are congruent, we could say angle M is congruent to angle P, which is what we were trying to prove by CPCTC. So this is kind of how this is going to work. We're going to go through the same process we did with proofs in previous parts of the module, but we're going to first prove the triangles are congruent like we normally do, and then use that to say the corresponding parts are congruent. Now, so let's do one real quick. Right here, we want to prove that angle J is congruent to angle N. And we've got a picture here with some stuff given to us, so let's put our statements that are given to us. So we notice that JL and NL have one mark. So we can say JL is congruent to NL. That's given in the picture. And we can also say that KL is congruent to ML, because that's given in the picture. What else do we know from the picture? Well, we know that the two angles in the middle are vertical, right? So we can say that those two angles are congruent because they're vertical. So we'll call those angle JLK. If you want to say KLJ, that's fine. We'll say JLK. And if we start with J, which is on the line that has one mark, so we start with it, we've got to use the one up here that has one mark, N. So we say NLM. Those two angles are congruent because they are vertical angles. Now, once we know that those are vertical, we can see that the triangles now are congruent, right? The whole point is to start by showing the triangles are congruent. So we've got side, side, angle, side, side, angle, side. So we could say that now triangle JOK is congruent to triangle NLM. Notice the difference in what we wrote on this table and the one above it, right? We've got angles in the one above it. This one is triangles because we're showing the whole triangle is congruent, not just one part. And we know that because of side, angle, side. All right, so great. Now we know the triangles are congruent. We know that the corresponding part's got to be congruent. So we know that J is now congruent to N. And we know K is congruent to M. And we know that the side NM is congruent to the side JK. So we know we can write our proof now. What we're trying to prove is angle J is congruent to angle N. Now we can say that down here. Angle J is congruent to angle N because of CPCTC. Once we found this right here, we can use this. All right, but not until we show that the triangles are congruent. You got to know you got the same car before you can say the parts in the car are the same. All right. So let's do one more, and then I'll let you guys try one. Okay, so let's take what we're given. Write those in the box first. AC is congruent to EC. Reason is given. And we know BC is congruent to DC because it's given. We're trying to prove AB is congruent to ED. So I can put that down here. That's my last sign. AB congruent to ED. Alright, so what's the information that we are not given that we can figure out? Well, just like the last problem, these triangles are vertical. So we can say angle ACB is congruent to angle ECD because of vertical angles. Now we've got side, angle, side again, just like the last problem. So we can say triangle ACB congruent to triangle ECD because of side, angle, side. And now once you know that the two triangles are congruent, then we know the corresponding part's got to be congruent. So this angle is going to be congruent to this angle, and this angle is congruent to this angle, and then this side is congruent to this side. All right, and that's what we're trying to find out. Those two sides are congruent. AB, which is this side up here, is congruent to ED, which is this side down here. So now we can say yes, those two sides are congruent because of the corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. All right, so let me know if you have any questions right here, but practice, try to do this one on your own, and pause this video real quick, try it out, let me know if you need help. All right, so we're going to start with our givens, which are that angle Q and angle is congruent to angle S, and angle TRS is congruent to angle RTQ. So we write those in to our table. The reasons are given, and we want to prove QR is congruent to ST. So that's going to go at the very bottom left. Then we need to determine what else do we know from our picture. Well, we know that TR is congruent to itself because it's the side that both triangles share. So it's going to be the same length for both triangles, obviously. So we say TR is congruent to TR using the reflective property. Now, after we determine those sides are the same, we see we got one angle another angle, and a side. Angle, angle, side. So we can say the two triangles are congruent by angle, angle, side. And once you know the two triangles are congruent, okay, once you know two cars are the same, you know their parts have to be the same part. So we can then say all these parts here have to be the same as each other. So this angle up here has to be the same as this angle down here. And then QR has to be the same as TS. And SR has to be the same as QT. Alright, so then we can say that yes, QR is congruent to ST because of corresponding parts, congruent triangles have to be congruent. Alright, our proof step. Okay, let me know if you have any more questions on this. I know it's not the easiest thing in the world, but if you just follow the process of start with your givens, then look at the picture, determine other information that you can figure out about what's congruent to what based off your knowledge of vertical angles or parallel lines and alternate interior angles or just reflective property. Use all those different things in order to find out more information. Then you can say that the triangles are congruent. Once you know the triangles are congruent, any of the parts they have corresponding, you can say are congruent by CPCTC. All right, so thanks for your time and attention, and let's go practice some.